Story time on how I slept with a ghost that haunted my house. And no, I'm not crazy. Okay, so boom, I live in a haunted house with my parents and my little brother. I'm 16 and we've been dealing with this haunting for the past 8 years. My parents tried to move houses, but they followed us and continued to haunt my family. I would wake up to doors being wide open, things around the house being moved, and my mom even said one of these ghosts pushed her while she was opening the fridge. My little brother is so scared he sleeps with my parents every night. Let's just say lots of crazy weird things was happening. Well, one night one of these ghosts got in my bed. I woke up and felt a presence right next to me. That presence was all up in my grill. Then it disappeared. This started happening every night and I kind of started expecting it. Well, one night something changed and the ghost had different plans. Like for part 2. Part 2 on how I slept with a ghost that haunted my house. Okay, so boom, like I said, this night the ghost had different plans for me. I felt my sheets slightly slip down and pressure on my body. The pressure made my body feel so heavy, and then I started feeling some things. And by the time those things was over, I just realized I did the nasty with a ghost. Y'all gotta work with me. TikTok won't let me explain those things. Anyways, I told my parents and they were not having it. They paid big money to fly someone in and have them blessed and clear the home from any hauntings. We tried this before, but it didn't work. My parents just finally went with the big guns and hired the expensive guy. Because at this point, things were going too far. So far, it looks like it worked because none of us felt any hauntings or presence from then. But since I'm now disturbed and violated by a ghost, I'm in therapy. And some people just call me crazy. But trust me, I know what went down. I felt it. This is why you shouldn't marry a professor. Okay, so boom. My husband is a professor at a university and he loves his job. Maybe a little too much. So my husband is 50 and I'm 40, and lately he hasn't been wanting to be intimate with me at all. He's been coming home from work way later than usual, saying that he's tutoring some students. Well, I decided to cook my husband's favorite meal and surprise him for working so hard. I went to the university and opened his classroom door and I couldn't believe my eyes. His classroom was empty, but I did see his car in a lot, so I went over to see if maybe he was just heading home. Well, when I went back downstairs, I was happy to see his car was still there. The car looked like it was shaking a little bit, but it was dark, so I just wasn't sure what was going on. I walked over to his car, and there it was. I was in complete shock. Like for part 2. This is why you shouldn't marry a professor, part 2. Okay, so boom, like I said, I opened his classroom door and it was empty, but I did see his car downstairs, so I went back downstairs. I was happy to see his car was still downstairs and it looked like it was shaking a little bit, but I just didn't know what was going on because it was a little bit dark. Well, I walked over to my husband's car and there it was. My husband was in the backseat of his car with a student and obviously not tutoring. And to my surprise, his student was a 23-year-old boy. And some back actions were taking place, child, if you know what I mean. I was so shocked, I dropped the food and I ran and went home. I didn't even give my husband a chance to react. He begged me not to leave him and said it was nothing and that he loved me. I obviously divorced him, and can you believe he's still with that same student now? Child, like for part. This is why you shouldn't marry a professor, part 3. Okay, so boom, like I said, I caught my husband in the backseat of his car with a 23-year-old boy, which was his student. He begged me not to leave him and said that he loved me, but I obviously divorced him because, like, whoa. At the time, I was hurt, but I genuinely got over it because at least he's living his truth now. I, on the other hand, finally had the kids I always wanted at 42, and I'm happily married with my new husband that's so in love with me. Stay away from them professors.
Story time of how I found out my boyfriend was cheating on me with my cousin. My boyfriend and I had been together for 2.5 years. His family loved me and my family loved him, and they expected us to get married. Well, last year when COVID started, we were actually in different countries, so we didn't see each other for 3 months. During those 3 months, we FaceTimed 4 times a day, and we were always texting. He happened to be quarantining in our hometown, so both of our families were in the same place. I was quarantined in a different country. One day my cousin calls me and tells me that she met a really nice guy on a dating website. I was so happy for her because she had had bad luck with guys. Every single week, her and I would catch up on the phone and she would tell me how much she liked this guy and how amazing their dates were and how amazing he was in bed, how sweet and considerate he was. I couldn't be happier for her. Well, when I finally get back home, my boyfriend is super distant and cold. So naturally, I called my cousin and complained. She told me to give him space. She said I should just leave him alone. And so like an idiot, I did leave him alone. One day my cousin calls me and tells me to come over for dinner. When I got there, my boyfriend's car was parked in her garage. I thought it was just her nice way of trying to get us to talk. I walk in and catch them doing the dirty on the couch. Come back for part 2. So I walk in on my cousin and my boyfriend doing the dirty on her couch. They quickly get up from the couch and get dressed. Of course, by that time, I'm in hysterics. I'm crying and yelling. My boyfriend instantly got on his knees and begged me for forgiveness. I went up to my cousin and I punched her right in the face. She wasn't expecting that. And I said, well, this is the guy that you've been dating, isn't it? She said yes, and that she was just trying to find the best way to tell me. And so she just thought the best way to tell me was to get me to walk in on her and him doing the dirty. I punched her again. My boyfriend came to her rescue though. Instantly went into hero mode, which made me even angrier, so I punched him too. I stormed out of her house and went back to my house. Well, I told my parents everything. And my dad went over to my uncle's house, my cousin's dad, and he told him everything. She was about to turn 19, so he took away her phone and her car. And I get a phone call from my ex. Come back for part 3. Part 3. So my lying, cheating ex calls me and explains to me why he actually slept with my cousin. He said that he was so lonely and that he didn't know what to do, and that the closest thing to me he could find was my cousin. Right, as if that was any comfort to me. He said I should be grateful that I didn't cheat with someone else. I told him he had totally betrayed my trust and that I could never ever trust him again. And then he confessed that she was pregnant and that his parents wanted them to get married. He said he just wanted to give me a heads up. Then he said that we could still be together but just not tell anyone, so basically he wanted me to be his side piece. I couldn't believe the words that were coming out of his mouth. It was like I didn't know this man. Guess what I did? I recorded the entire conversation. So I went straight to my cousin and I let her listen to it. She was so shocked. She couldn't believe that he would offer to have me as a side chick. Well, I also let my uncle listen to it. He went to my ex's house and beat him up. Honestly, that made me sad, but he deserved it. They now have a baby and he's gained 50 pounds. Trust your instincts, girl, and always record your conversations. Also, how cute are my nails? Part 2 of how I got my boyfriend to cheat on me so that I could break up with him. So I got this girl on Instagram to DM him, and this girl was totally his type. Basically, she looked like me but with blonde hair. So she sent him a little DM. He wasted no time and he got back to her. That same day, they set up a freaking date. So I told this girl that all she had to do was go out with him. Like, meet him at a restaurant, but that was it. Little did I know that she had a crush on him. And it makes sense now thinking about it because my friend recommended her, and my friend afterward told me that she actually had a crush on him. A few days later, she sends me a picture of him sleeping in her bed, without a shirt on. And she basically tells me everything that happened. So now, I have all this proof. But guess what? I actually got really pissed. It broke my heart because I didn't expect him to do that. And he was totally avoiding all my calls and messages. He finally came over to my house, and that's when I showed him all of the receipts. All the pictures and messages between him and the girl. That's when he told me that she drugged him and forced him into doing it. Of course, I knew that wasn't true. Then he pulls out a ring and asked me to marry him. That's when he got on his knees and started begging. Part 3 is up. Part 3 of how I set up my boyfriend to cheat on me so that I could break up with him. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It was sent to me on Instagram. As he's begging on his hands and knees for me to marry him, gets a call from the girl that he cheated on me with. He puts the phone in his pocket and he started acting all nervous, so that's how I knew. That's when I told him to show me his phone. Then he ran to the bathroom and threw it into the toilet. Then he locked himself in my bathroom and basically begged me for 3 hours to stay with him. Told me that he would never be able to find anyone as good as I was, and that he loved me and blah 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 blah. At this point, I told him I was going to call the cops to get him out, but I just couldn't bring myself to it. I really felt bad for him. I mean, after all, I did set him up. He eventually left and I didn't speak to him for a few weeks. A few days ago, I actually started talking to this new guy. He's been super flaky, and every time we decide to go out, he always bails. So now I'm thinking maybe I should take my ex back. He sent me flowers, but I've been trying to ignore him, but my parents don't want me to get back with him. Part of me thinks that he was probably already cheating on me. I mean, he DM'd that girl really quick. I honestly don't know what to do, and I'm even starting to feel guilty about what I did. At the same time, he totally shouldn't have cheated. What do you guys think I should do? Part 2 of how I got my boyfriend to cheat on me so that I could break up with him. So I got this girl on Instagram to DM him, and this girl was totally his type. Basically, she looked like me but with blonde hair. So she sent him a little DM. He wasted no time and he got back to her. That same day, they set up a freaking date. So I told this girl that all she had to do was go out with him. Like, meet him at a restaurant, but that was it. Little did I know that she had a crush on him. And it makes sense now thinking about it because my friend recommended her, and my friend afterward told me that she actually had a crush on him. A few days later, she sends me a picture of him sleeping in her bed, without a shirt on. And she basically tells me everything that happened. So now, I have all this proof. But guess what? I actually got really pissed. It broke my heart because I didn't expect him to do that. And he was totally avoiding all my calls and messages. He finally came over to my house, and that's when I showed him all of the receipts. All the pictures and messages between him and the girl. That's when he told me that she drugged him and forced him into doing it. Of course, I knew that wasn't true. Then he pulls out a ring and asked me to marry him. That's when he got on his knees and started begging. Part 3 is up.
Imagine TikTok being so powerful that they actually help you identify the person that almost murdered you. On my For You page the other day, I found this viral video that you guys might recognize, which states videos I took before almost being hunted and murdered. I clicked on her page, listened to her story, and was like, I have to know more. So I reached out and got the full thing. This is the case of Flowers Don't Growl. April 29th through April 30th of 2019, Taylor and her boyfriend Chris decided to take a trip to Falls Creek Falls, Tennessee. Taylor was 5 months pregnant at the time, so they figured they needed one last little trip before they were going to have a baby. And Taylor swore that Chris was going to propose. So that's why she documented so much of this trip, not even realizing that later on it was going to be used as evidence. So they set up at their assigned camping lot. They spent their time hiking, exploring, having fun. Taylor would collect flowers along the way to document it for memory's sake, but please keep these flowers in mind. And then on the second day, everyone from their assigned area was gone except for them. So they were more alone than before, or so they thought. Welcome back to part 2 of Flowers Don't Growl. So later in the night on their last day, they ended up hearing a loud crash. There's very windy roads nearby, so they figured that it was a wreck. And just to make sure kids weren't involved and that everyone was safe, they got out of their tent and ran over to the crash site, which was maybe half a mile away to go check on the people. The sheriff ends up showing up and it's like a DUI situation, but everyone ultimately was okay. So before heading back to their campsite, Taylor says she has to go use the restroom. So her and Chris walk over to the bathroom so she can do her thing, and in the distance they see a light flickering. And as it gets closer, they notice that someone is running with a flashlight. So they're both cracking jokes to each other like, oh my gosh, this guy really has to go to the bathroom. But once he approaches the restroom, he ends up stopping right at them instead of actually going into the bathroom. And states, and I quote, "Wow, you guys are fast." Creepy. Taylor notices that he has a weird smile on his face and feels really nauseous but just associates it with the pregnancy. So just to be nice, they continue to have a conversation with him, but ultimately this is where things go wrong. Part 3 on Flowers Don't Growl. So Chris and Taylor continue their weird interaction with this man. Chris explaining that they got to the wreck fast because they wanted to make sure everyone was okay. And the guy goes, yeah, I guess I'm just used to it. And Taylor's confused because like, used to what? Hikes? Car wrecks? They ask what he does, and he says he travels a lot and likes to go camping. And Taylor, starting to get very uncomfortable now, tells Chris that, hey, they need to go back to the campsite because the police will be over there waiting for their statements. Just trying to make an excuse to leave, and Chris could tell it was BS. And as they start to take steps back, he starts to take steps towards them, asking questions like, hey, how long are you guys going to be here for? And his hand kept playing with his hoodie pocket. Chris was starting to pick up on the message as they continued to walk backwards, while the man followed them forward. And then this guy decides to tell them a little story. He was like, car accident. It got me thinking this morning as I was hiking and I passed these flowers. I stopped because they were so beautiful and I heard a deep growl and it scared me. And it makes me think, you never know what day is going to be your last. That's when they saw the knife. Part 4 to Flowers Don't Growl. So this is when Taylor noticed the outline in his hoodie pocket was the shape of a knife. It completely clicked for her and she told her husband that they needed to run. He looked at her like, what's going on? And she just states, flowers don't growl. So they took off running, and this is when he took off chasing them. And I'll show a map of where exactly they were chased. This is where Taylor and Chris ended up, and this is where they last saw the guy chasing them. And they made it all the way back to the crash site, and luckily the police were still there. They told them what happened and made a report. And 2 of the cops went out looking for him but couldn't find him anywhere, while the other officer accompanied them back to the campsite so that they could pack up their stuff and leave. They tried to get updated on their case later on, but never ever got an update. Having the baby and it being a couple years later, Taylor sits down and ends up making a TikTok. It goes viral and a bunch of people start to DM her with potential suspects. Taylor stopped looking at her DMs because it got so emotional, but one user that messaged her lived in the Falls Creek Falls area and had followed a particular case. She opened the DM and saw the man. This is James L. Jordan. Welcome to Flowers Don't Growl Part 5. So Taylor immediately recognized James L. Jordan as being the person that tried to attack her and her now husband that night. And horrifyingly enough, he ended up killing 2 weeks later, stabbing one female victim that did survive, but stabbing the male to death. The male victim ended up sending out an SOS last minute before he passed, and the police came to arrest Jordan. And honestly, one of the worst things was that he was not found guilty by reason of insanity. And Taylor has tried to reach out to police multiple times because he was very calm and collected the night that her and her husband survived. She has scoured all of her photos trying to figure out where he was at and found out that he was staying back here outside of the regular lots. Followers have pointed out things like this creepy shadow in this video, but ultimately we don't really know where he was at. But because of the story that he told about the flowers, She thinks that he had been stalking them for a while, watching her pick them. Taylor now is using her page to promote safety, learning how to protect yourself and carrying items such as mace or a taser, and campsites where you pay to camp probably should have security. Taylor is tagged below, so please go follow her to keep up with her story.
Story time about how this one girl bullied me so bad she tried to beat me up, but guess what? The joke was on her because my sister beat her up. I was in 8th grade and I was bullied pretty badly, but this one girl in particular who didn't like me would make my life miserable. This girl was in 10th grade and I was in 8th grade at the time. I didn't defend myself at the time. I was really just scared of everything and everyone because I got bullied so much. And my sister knew that, which is why she was always looking out for me. She always had my back. So the bully, let's call her Jackie. Jackie started leaving me mean notes in my locker. And at the time, I guess I didn't really know if it was her. It could have been many people since I got bullied by many people. And the kids in my class would group around me whenever I would go to open my locker just to see my reaction when I would read the mean things she left in the notes. So for example, she would make fun of my acne and my big lips. But it got so much worse. One day I was walking down the hallway and she comes up right behind me and spills fake blood all over my back, making it look like I had my period. I was mortified, and she did this in front of everyone when we were on break. Then in front of everyone, she says that she's gonna beat me up at lunch and that I better be there, so come back for part 2. Part 2. So Jackie the bully spilled fake blood down my back, making it look like I had my period, and then she announced to everyone that she was going to beat me up at lunch and that I better be there. The bell rings and someone tells me that she's waiting for me at the soccer field. My god, I was so scared. Of course I wasn't planning on going, but 3 of the girls in my class literally took me by my arms and took me to the soccer field. Gosh, were they mean. And of course, there's a whole audience waiting for me. Jackie was right in the center. As soon as I get there, she starts yelling at me. And you know what I did? I asked her, "Why do you hate me so much?" She actually didn't know what to say. She stayed quiet. So I asked her, "What did I do to you?" Then she said she saw me on a commercial in our local channel and that it made her really angry. And I said, "Is that all?" Then she said that she didn't like my face either. She starts pushing me backwards. She pushed me a few times and I fell back. She was literally about to kick me when I hear my sister yelling from behind the crowd saying, "Why don't you pick on someone your own size?" The crowd parts and my sister comes through and tells Jackie to leave me alone. Then she tried to kick me again and my sister tackled her to the ground. Come back for part 3. Part 3. As Jackie the bully is trying to kick me, my sister tackles her to the ground. Well, Jackie got really scared because she was not expecting that. And my sister picks her up from the floor and throws her into a bush. Jackie starts to cry and she says that she's going to tell on my sister. Well, my sister says, "I have all the notes that you've been sending to my sister and we can compare it to your own handwriting." Guess who they'll believe? My sister took me to the principal's office and we gave her all of the notes and I told her everything that happened. So the principal went and searched Jackie's backpack. Guess what she found? Scissors and tape. Jackie confessed that she wanted to tie my hands and cut off all my hair. She got suspended from school for 3 days. When she came back, her parents took her to my classroom and made her apologize in front of everyone. If you're being Story time about how my fiance broke off our wedding because of my best friend. My fiance and I had been together for 2 years, but my best friend and I had been friends for over 8 years, so I trusted her with my life. When my fiance and I met, she approved and she loved him. She was always looking for a new relationship because she could never commit to anyone. Eventually, I started feeling like she was envious of the relationship because I had found someone that I truly loved and that wanted to marry me. On the other hand, she was a serial dater and went out with so many guys she couldn't even keep track. One night we had a double date and she brought this new guy she met. Throughout the whole date, my fiance and my best friend were hitting it off, talking, making jokes, and I was actually really happy because I was happy they got along. Her date even noticed this and commented about how we should switch dates. I thought it was so funny. Well, little did I know that after that night, they actually started texting every once in a while. Inside jokes and memes, stuff like that. I did know about it and I thought it was really cute and I was so happy that they were getting along. After all, she was going to be the godmother of our future children. One day I saw she sent him a picture through text message. You'll never guess what I found. Come back for part 2. Part 2. So I noticed my best friend sent my fiance a picture and he was in the bathroom, so I went ahead and opened the picture. You guys, it was a selfie of her wrapped in a towel fresh out of the shower. So of course I show it to him and he's like, "Oh my god, why would she send that?" He totally played it off like he had no idea why she would send that to him. So I call my best friend and I say, "Hey, did you just send my fiance this picture?" She hesitated for a second and then she's like, "Oh my god, please don't tell me I sent him the picture by mistake." And I was like, "Yeah, you sent him a picture of you in a towel." And she said, "I'm so mortified, I'm so sorry, I meant to send it to somebody else." And then she's like, "You believe me, right?" And part of me didn't want to, but part of me had to. I couldn't believe that my best friend would do that, so I said, "Yeah, of course I believe you." And she completely changed the subject and told me about the guy that she was currently seeing who she actually meant to send the picture to. A few weeks passed by and my fiance says he has to go on a work trip. Weirdly enough, she said she was going to go on a trip with a guy that she had just met. I asked her to meet the guy before they actually went on a trip and she said no because he's really shy. Can you believe they went on this trip together? Come back for part 3. Part 3. So my best friend and my fiance go on a trip by themselves behind my back. The whole time they were on their trips, I thought he was on a work trip and I thought she was with some dude. Because of the time difference, my fiance kept saying that he couldn't FaceTime, so we would just talk on the phone. The conversations were really short and he was acting really strange. He told me he was on a work trip to London, and because the whole thing felt so strange, I decided to call his mom. So I call her and I'm like, hey, where did he travel to again? And she replied, Aruba. I didn't say anything to her and I just got off the phone. I knew he was lying. And I knew my best friend was in Aruba. I connected the dots and realized they were both on a vacation together. The day that he was supposed to fly in, I showed up to the airport knowing that he was coming from Aruba. And I see them walking out to arrivals hand in hand. They saw me right away, and my best friend literally ran away. That's when he told me that he no longer wanted to be with me and that he wanted to be with my best friend. I had already paid for the wedding. He was such a coward. 2 months later, I found out she cheated on him, and he